So for those of you who don't know me, I'm Gaetano Vaccaro. I'm one of the bilingual resource specialists here at the Long Island Arbor, and I'm co-hosting with my colleague, Heather.
Hi, everybody. And I'm happy to be here to start part two. If you were not a part of our first session, it's okay, because the concepts and things we're going to cover are, I think, we're building on some of the things we learned, but it's not necessary to have been in the first session. I just want to point out I'm featuring some of my husband Eric's photography behind me from his travels, our travels around the world. So take a look. And other than that, welcome. I think Guy's gonna start, and of course you have the chat to ask any questions. We're gonna do a little breakout session to interact a little together. And happy Friday.
Happy Friday. I want to say to all the participants, some people are saying they can't hear us. Make sure you join the audio. So I'm going to type in here, join audio for Zoom meeting.
So before we begin, I just want to make sure, because I know Guy and I are co-presenting and sharing screens. Right now, Guy, we see the role play, challenging cultural bias narrative. You see the
Correct.
story? Okay, good. All right. So as Guy was saying, we obviously that video is a very humorous way of pointing out, a concern that we're trying to address in this workshop, and some of the assumptions we make about people unwittingly, right? And how we can use the strategies that Guy mentioned from Zaretta Hammond about intention, attention, and time to kind of break some of these habits. But first we have to be aware of them, right? We have to be aware of some of these, not habits, but biases, sorry. So this activity is from Brown University, I believe, and I have the link for that resource for you. And we normally do this in the physical space. We would have people get up and role play it. But Guy, why don't you go ahead and read the scenario, and then I'm going to stop share. I'm going to show you the questions. We'll go through the questions, and then we'll stop sharing our screens and go into our breakout rooms. So Guy, you want to go ahead and run through the next two slides?
Great. So recently a faculty meeting was held in a school in a suburb with a large population of ethnically diverse students. One of the participants, Mr. Stivali, has been a math and technology teacher for about 20 years. Mr. Stivali regularly makes comments to students who are immigrants from the Dominican Republic, such as, "I bet you never saw a computer until you came to the United States. And I know you have trouble with English, so let's see if someone can translate this into Dominican for you." At one point during the meeting, Mr. Stivali asserted that some of these kids, referring to the Dominican students, just don't want to learn, and you can't make them. They don't care, and their parents don't care. He then looked around the table, assuming that other participants would be in agreement. Other participants looked uncomfortable, but no one challenged his statement. And Heather, I can imagine people, as I'm reading this, their eyes are rolling in their head and steam is coming out, but
Yeah, exactly. I think that there's other variations of this scenario where you've been in a position where someone might have said something that can be, can reflect an implicit bias and you're not sure what to do. And we're doing this. We're going to show you these next set of questions and saying, think about a time that you've been in that position. And also, what does it mean to not at least say something? We need to address these situations. If we don't, there it goes. If we don't, it might imply complicity on our part. So if we see something that is maybe an uncomfortable situation for you, or we hear something that is something that we are concerned about, how do we address it? So here are the questions. You want to go through the questions, Guy?
Sure. So how do you think Mr. Stivali's cultural deficit approach impacts students? What kind of information do you think Mr. Stivali needs in order to change his approach? Why do you think no one challenged Mr. Stivali's statement at the faculty meeting? As a colleague of Mr. Stivali's, how might you have responded? So we're going to try to, when we go into these breakout rooms, to have these questions available so that we can have that discussion. Then we'll share out in our chat room when we come back, or perhaps even open it up and hear what you have to say.
Yes, and think, you know, if you, obviously you're going to address this scenario as it's given and all, but you also might want to share, it's not going to be recorded, in your breakout sessions, experiences you've had, and share with your peers and what they might have said. So you're, you know, free to brainstorm, in addition to just using these as discussion starters. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to put us into breakout rooms. So the CRS framework addresses this when they talk about teachers in their section on teachers. We must utilize asset-based pedagogies that recognize cultural difference, recognize it, and leverage an individual's funds of knowledge in order to cultivate critical thinking and promote positive student outcomes. And so funds of knowledge is a really important concept that we all need to embrace, knowing that culture and cultural knowledge guide behavior. So we focus the first part of this training on what is your culture, and how do you identify, and how does that guide your behavior. Now we need to know and embrace and try to find out more about what funds of knowledge our students are bringing, right? All cultures have strengths, funds of knowledge. How can we capitalize on those strengths to help students learn? All people participate in one or more cultural communities. Cultures are dynamic and they change over time and through interaction. And a study of culture reveals patterns and variation. So even though we may think we understand a culture, there's all kinds of variation. We cannot make assumptions. Getting to know your students. When we do that, get to know you, we mean really in a much deeper level, and actually identifying those funds of knowledge is a critical part of culturally responsive education. So what is culture? Ways of living, shared behaviors, beliefs, customs, values, and ways of knowing that guide groups of people in their daily life and are transmitted from one generation to the next. So the work we do today to change our learning communities will carry on in future generations. The work we do within our families, within our neighborhoods, will carry on and be transmitted. You know, we have to, we know that we can change these things even in our small interactions with people. So just to give you an example about generations and change and the things we bring with us, our names. Let's talk about our names for a minute. So you can do this on your own. We're not going to do any little breakout, but just think to yourself, you know, what is your full name? Who gave you your name? Why was this name chosen? And if you could change your name, what would it be, right? So if you'd like to put your name story in the chat, feel free to just say what kind of significance your name has to you. And while you're gathering your thoughts and writing about the importance of your name, what, you know, who gave it to you, why was it chosen? If you could change it, why? I'll tell you my story. My name was, my mother read the name in a romance novel. No particular family connection. She liked the name, but I happen to like my name very much, but it doesn't associate me with my culture of origin, you know, or country of origin of my family. It just, to me, it's a very romantic, beautiful name. And
You
I
know,
wouldn't change
Heather, I was chuckling because I'm sure my colleagues are already thinking about Tommy, and they know my story, how when I transferred from one school to another, in the middle of the year, the teacher asked me to get up and introduce myself. And as you can see, my name is Gaetano, but that wasn't very American. And so I changed my name to Tommy. And you know, that stayed with me through middle school and high school. And my yearbook has, you know, good luck, Tommy. Thank you again, you know, Tommy, Tommy, Tommy. So it's very interesting, you know, when we talk about a name and the importance of a name. But yeah, so I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah, and as educators, we mention this because we know that we see students come in who have names that maybe we're unfamiliar with, or that we can't pronounce, and teachers will and have and either ask them, oh, can I call you something else? And then the student may or may not agree, which is not acceptable behavior, because um, you have to make an effort to use the name that the child has been given, or the name that the child may say, I would like you to call me this. But when you impose yourself on there and say, oh, well, I just can't pronounce it, so I'm going to shorten it to something else, this is not culturally responsive practice. And I know it's a common thing with in schools. You might have multiple names. Find out which name on a roster, find out which name the student would like to be called. Work on the pronunciation. We all struggle with any number of situations where we can't pronounce a name, but learn it. It's our job and it's important. We don't want people to mispronounce our names. So if you see something that's unusual or difficult spelling, just take the time. It's really important. So getting back to hidden curriculum, Guy's going to show us a video, and you may have seen it already. If everybody, if you have seen it, it's just a 3-minute clip around how this is an author, and she's talking about the books she read and how it impacted her view in life, and then of course some of her other experiences. So think about the type of messages you send through the curriculum, the books you choose, the texts, the messages in your classroom. What messages are you sending by the environment? If it's well tended, if it's not well tended, what kind of messages are you sending? So there is a hidden curriculum that teaches students to accept dominant ideologies through explicit and implicit messages. So they, on page 611, they stated, educators have a responsibility to carefully, critically, and consciously examine the stories they share and how those stories potentially shape the way students learn to make sense of the world. So I thought that this research tied in very nicely with this video. And so if you do have the time, the entire document is in the drive. So just be careful the things you choose. And this is something we could talk about another time, but there are different levels of, designing culturally relevant curriculum. And if you go to, obviously in the squares, you want to look at the bottom right. An inquiry-based model is what we're looking for. The contributive model has been around for a long time, which is just highlighting heroes and holidays from different cultures. Additive is adding maybe some themes and perspectives without changing the structure of the curriculum, just maybe, adding Women's History Month, right? Transformative allows students to see different perspectives and maybe use different lenses, right, to view something. But the last one is where we're hoping to ultimately wind up is inquiry based. And this is the also mentioned in the CRSE framework around project-based learning that is involves social justice ideas and concepts that allow students to use everything they've learned and then relate it to their world in an authentic context. So it's action, it's using reflection and then taking action on issues. The advanced literacies, these topic briefs on advanced literacies for linguistically diverse learners, really great resource. Another workshop we could do, but just know that they exist and they're brand new and aligned to the next generation standards for ELA. Really a good read. Very easy to get through all of them. They're brief and I find them really useful. Another great resource is Teaching Tolerance. It's at tolerance.org. Amazing classroom resources, teaching strategies, student texts for all levels around social justice issues. It is chock full of wonderful things. So please take a look at that. We didn't get a chance to talk about this, but do think about when we're talking about equity and we're talking about our English language learners, think about equitable grading. This is a big topic and that we can unpack right now, but how do we measure success if the students, the proficiency in the target language is not at a level that allows them to completely express their thoughts in writing or on these exams that we design? What are we doing to identify their mastery of a subject? And these are some suggestions to help you. But again, a whole nother workshop. So we end where we began. How can the vision presented in the CRS framework be put into action by all stakeholders? I hope that some of the activities and ideas that we discussed will help you start to create an action plan in your district. And the Auburn is here to help you with that. This is something that is very important to us, and we look forward to working together with you to put these things into action. Same question we asked you at the end of our last session. This is for you to reflect on. What should you stop doing? What should you keep improving? And what should you start doing? I'll leave you with this thought. We need to help students and parents cherish and preserve the ethnic and cultural diversity that nourishes and strengthens this community and this nation. And these words, I get chills when I think of Cesar Chavez, how prophetic they are, especially today. So always, they are always relevant, and even more so during this crisis that we're all experiencing.